I am so pleased to see you all here, and I want to welcome you. I'm Susan McIntosh. I'm the director of Scientia, and we are very excited that you're here at the launch of our second year exploring the theme of the power of ideas. This short lecture format worked really well last year in a time when all of us have time at a premium, and we're very aware of how we spend our time. 5 minutes seems like a really interesting but challenging for our speakers format to engage in. Last year in this September lecture, we've posted all our webcasts online, and we've had several hundred hits on that one, so people watch outside of the lecture theater as well. And we've also posted two approximately 50-minute podcasts of 8 each of last year's mini lectures, so that you can download those and listen to them on your iPod if you're interested. And we thought that would be a great thing to make available to alums and anyone who is interested in our programs. And as you know, the purpose of our organization, our institute on campus, is to bring people together from different disciplines to engage in hearing various ideas, and then have a forum, either formalized, which we're not really having through a Q&A, but informal through a reception afterwards, in which you can talk to one another, talk to the speakers if there are ideas that have particularly intrigued you, and generally develop more our sense of being a university community engaged with ideas. So, with that brief introduction, I will go directly to our speakers today, and I'm very grateful to all four of them for accepting the 5-minute challenge. And our first speaker is Caleb Kemere, Assistant Professor in Electrical and Computer Engineering.
Welcome. So, memory is something that's really amazing that our brain does. When we're awake, we're constantly perceiving the world in exquisite sensory detail, and not just vision and sound, right, but things like the pain in our hip. So that's a lot of data, maybe hundreds of megabytes a second. And if you're alive for something like 70 years, as hopefully many of you will be, that's about 1 billion seconds. So that's a lot of data. And if we stored it all, that would obviously be overwhelming and not that useful. But when something interesting or important happens, and we rarely know ahead of time when we're going to run into a Mack truck, we can recall the details of that experience many years later. So what that tells us is that at some level, we are remembering everything, but we just discard the stuff that doesn't end up being important. So the ability to form and recall long-lasting, detailed memories gives us joy and satisfaction, and it also helps us avoid repeating those dangerous mistakes that we've made. But of course, for some people, invasive memory of traumatic experiences can be debilitating. So here's why I, as an engineer, am excited about memory. Ooh, cool. As neuroscience has advanced in the last century in animal models, we've learned a lot about how the activity of neurons, say, represent sensory experience like vision and touch, and how other groups of neurons in other areas work together to generate movement. And so maybe a drum roll is appropriate here. In the last decade or so, we think we've identified the neural activity that corresponds with recalling specific experiences. So that's super cool. And the reason that I'm excited is that I think we're right on the verge of being able to interact with the process of remembering in real time and maybe help that PTSD patient. Okay, so now I have to tell you a little bit more about how we think memory works. Memory is fundamentally about associations. Connecting all the different aspects of what makes a pie together, so that if I see a triangle cut out of a circle, it makes me think of caramelized apples. That means that memories need to connect all sorts of sensory areas together. And episodic memories, like the story of the snickerdoodle pie I had for dessert this last Thanksgiving, they have to connect stuff across time and causality also, right? So we understand sensory processing, so identifying the circle shapes or the taste of pie as being the result of a hierarchy of different neural areas processing information, so edge, shapes, objects. And at the very top sits this associational area called the hippocampus, which actually wraps around our midbrain, sort of like this. We know that the hippocampus sits atop of this pyramid because when it gets damaged, patients lose the ability to form new memories, but they still act and talk normally. So if you walk out of their hospital room, though, then you walk back in, then they don't remember who you are. So when we stick electrodes into the hippocampus of rats and let them run around mazes and do sort of rat things that rats like to do, which mainly involves looking for food and eating it when they find it, we find that neurons strongly represent space. And they do it in a particular way where each neuron is active, say, in a particular spot, and then quiet everywhere else. So that means that most of the neurons in the hippocampus are quiet most of the time. But, and this is what's super cool, if you're looking at these same neurons when the rats are asleep or when they're eating, you find something very different. So during brief bursts of activity, lots of neurons in the hippocampus are active all at the same time, but with the following property. So if neuron A was active here, and neuron B was active here, and neuron C was active here, and the rat ran from over here to get some food, and now he's sitting and eating it, then what we see is during these bursts of activity is A, B, and C are reactivated. And not just reactivated, but they're temporally compressed into hundreds of milliseconds. So that's really awesome if you think about it, because it's as if the rat is remembering running from A to C and getting the food. So in my lab and many others, we're exploring these replay sequences to try to understand if these might be the atomic units of memory. So this is what I think is the best evidence. And this is where having someone dance the experiment would have been awesome next time. As a postdoc, I built a system for detecting these hippocampal ripples in real time. And so my colleague put some animals into a W-shaped maze. So here's my W-shaped maze. And we trained rats to do the following behavior. So they had to learn that they could get food at the end of each of these three arms. And if they first had to run from the outer arm to the middle, and when they left the middle arm, they had to go to the opposite outer arm. So what's cool about this task is that it requires memory to do this part, right, where you're alternating. Because as you're leaving the center arm, you have to remember where you had been previously. So while rats were doing this, we detected these hippocampal ripples and selectively silenced the hippocampus, just during the brief periods when the rat might have been replaying, might have been doing this reactivation. And we found that, lo and behold, the animals were able to learn this part where they had to go from the outer arm to the middle arm, but they weren't able to do this alternation. So super cool. And unfortunately, that's the state of the art right now. So but here's what's coming. In my lab here at Rice, we're building a system to try to actually decode what the rat is remembering during these sequences, these bursts of activities, and then see how he uses that specific information to learn and to guide behavior. So we're still a bit far from being able to target specific traumatic memories and help the PTSD patient, but I hope that you'll agree that we're on the road. So, okay, I hope that you will take away 3 things from this talk, if nothing else. First, that memory is pretty cool. Second, that the act of recollection probably involves sequences of activity of neurons in the hippocampus. And third, that we're on the way to being able to probe deeply into the mechanisms of episodic memory using cool engineering technology. So, and I'll give you, since I still have a few seconds, I'll give you this last little tidbit. Memory is like the milk in your refrigerator. You don't know how good it is until you open it up and check. All right, thank you.